Get the cream, precious metals or the crypto things. Your bars are light like the one that's on a Smith machine. But my Maxwell and I ain't speaking about the pretty.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to be talking about WWEEVIL, Episode 3, Sasha Banks, the boss. Now, I think this was probably the weakest episode of Evil because from a character development concept, they spent a lot of time talking about Sasha as a person, basically telling the backstory of her career in terms of what made her decide to get into wrestling. And this was basically just a documentary on Sasha Banks, you know, for people who might not be familiar with Sasha Banks. She grew up in Iowa on a farm. It was the only quote unquote colored person in town. You know, her being, cousins with Snoop Dogg and being a fan of Eddie Guerrero growing up. And she didn't know anything about it. She didn't really have too much character until she got to the Performance Center in 2012. At this point, she was 18 or 19 years old. So she gets to the Performance Center and she's for the first time forced to come up with a character. And she starts putting together the boss. And so she starts watching interviews, Floyd Mayweather, Kanye West, and then she is influenced by Bratz Dolls and Nicki Minaj. So she's looking at all of these different influences and how she can put them together. And one of the things that you notice by looking at this is she kind of took a lot from the music and entertainment industry. And looking at things from the music and entertainment industry, it's a different beast. It's a different level of ego when you're dealing with those kinds of people. Now, it's interesting, because you're looking at a highly urban concept. Like she's not looking at Hanson or Motorhead or anything like that. And it's not like Radiohead is like one of the influences for, the boss. It's a hip hop influence. So you're looking at a hip hop themed character. And it, of course, marries perfectly with her cousin being Snoop Dogg, is one of the biggest rap artists of all time. So when you are thinking about this character and you look at the character, the 4-finger rings, which is big in hip hop in the past. You've probably seen movies like Do the Right Thing. You had Radio Raheem. You had the 4-finger rings. RZA also wears a bunch of rings. She's very glamorous, the multicolored hair, which, the Nicki Minaj and the Bratz doll with the wigs, the traditional pro wrestling with the glitter and the glitz of it. But when you listen to her talk about her experience, the influences, you can see a lot of them, Now, I don't see as much Floyd Mayweather out of Sasha Banks, but I see the money team aspect of it. You could see with the entourage, that was what she kind of wanted at first, where she just wanted to have the crew. And that's when she created the Sasha crew or the boss crew or something like that, where she would have like these henchmen that would be around her all the time. So that was kind of like her initial concept of the money team, but it kind of died out and it didn't really stick. Now basically that's what her fans are called. It's called the crew. But she did have an entourage for a little while. I think they should go back to that, to be quite honest. I think that would be better for her character if she had an entourage. I mean, the boss, but the boss of what? Nowadays, it seems more like Sasha Banks is kind of like WWE's version of Beyonce. And that's kind of how it is, where she's sort of this highly visible, attention-seeking, almost robot. She's not quite Charlotte level of robot, but she's not really playing into the archetype that much anymore. Now the boss is all about leadership. The boss is a king position. So the boss would be, and I think that it made sense and more in NXT because she seemed to have a little bit more of a status in NXT, and she had a little bit of status on SmackDown as the top female. But Sasha Banks has been positioned most of her time on the main roster has been secondary to either Charlotte or Ronda Rousey, or sometimes Asuka, or sometimes even Bailey. And it doesn't really fit, the boss character for her to be, the quiet tag team partner of Bailey, so that didn't really work out. But the boss is a status thing. And you can see that in the Sasha Banks character, that a lot of what she's been struggling with has been about achieving and maintaining status. And, the boss is aspirational in a way, in so much as that she claims it before she is it. And in a way, it becomes true over time. Kind of like rappers. Rappers they live a very fake it till you make it lifestyle. So they'll talk about all the rings, and they'll have fake jewelry, and they'll have rented cars, and they'll even rent prostitutes or whatever for their music video. They don't really have money like that. It's a fake it till you make it sort of concept. And if you take, Sasha Banks' character from that perspective, then it makes a lot more sense. She's, this young, impressionable young lady who's trying to make a name for herself. So she basically claims the title of being the boss, having a crew, and has the sort of glitzy lifestyle that's not really earned. And that's kind of, part of the heat, is that she hasn't really earned it. It's like, boss, the boss of what? You're not the boss of me. You're not the boss of anybody. You don't have any employees. What do you do? And over time, she becomes more successful. It becomes more true that she's the boss. She gets involved in attention-seeking behaviors. She's ruthless. She's cutthroat. She actually gets in on some very important firsts. I think she was in the first women's Hell in a Cell match. She was the first woman to have a solo main event at WrestleMania. Was Sasha Banks. At the women's main event with WrestleMania was the triple threat match. Her match was the first ever singles match to main event WrestleMania, and between two women. So she's been there. And when she transferred over to the Blueprint, being sort of, if you look at the Blueprint, she's the one who sets the standards. And she said that I'm the blueprint, I'm the standard, or whatever. It's different from being the boss. It means that other people are following in your footsteps, and that is more true than her being the boss. But I like the boss persona because of the aspirational nature of it. And to me, that seemingly is more enjoyable because it does have the hip hop roots to it. And because you can see a lot of the influence of the rap status, because a lot of rappers are that way. A lot of them, aspire to be bigger than they really are. And in doing so, they give themselves way too much credit. They give themselves way too much authority. They give themselves way too much status. And they don't really have any or all of that. And sometimes it ends up coming to them. It's the law of attraction. If you keep putting it out there in the universe, eventually it comes to you. And for Sasha Banks, it did. Eventually her character did become the boss. She did become somebody who can call her own shots. She did become somebody who, was given more respect, who can command an audience. Sasha Banks was put on SmackDown for a reason, because she's a top draw in terms of the women's division. She's wanted for different outside media things, such as being in The Mandalorian, for a reason. Now it wasn't true that she was the boss in NXT. It wasn't true when she first came that she was the boss. But over time, people bought into the persona. People bought into the vision that she had for the character through her portrayal of the character. And you could see it in NXT when she was calling herself the boss, and she had to be violent in order to really get that stamp of approval. And Bailey was the one that she chose as a target to sort of be the one that she bullied in order for people to see and understand and to educate the audience about what she means by when she says she's the boss. And it didn't quite translate the same to the main roster, even though they do have their times where Sasha Banks has those tendencies where she can really get in there and get her hands dirty. They tend to keep her babyface very often, even though she's heel sometimes, but she's babyface a lot more on the main roster than she was on NXT. So she's, constantly being tempered with, the babyface thing. But as a heel, Sasha Banks is very good. She's vicious. That's one thing that you need to have. You need to have an intense, violent streak. And Sasha Banks isn't, super hyper violent, going to hit you with a weapon. But she finds new ways to torture opponents. And I think that that's a very interesting aspect of the character that's very underrated, especially when it comes to her psychology in terms of how she actually does single out body parts, And they showed the episode where I think it was a match in Brooklyn with Bayley, and she really targeted Bayley's hand and really went after her and with stomping and kicking the hand. And you can see the Hell in a Cell match with Bayley when she went out and basically bullied Bayley into submission. These things really help people buy into the aspirational aspects of her being the blueprint and being the boss. Is they see that she's willing to do whatever it takes to convince you that she is the boss, that she is in control, that she's glamorous, and that she's willing to do whatever it takes for you to accept who she is and what she is, and she's going to look good doing it. And so I get it. I get the Sasha Banks character. I wish they would do more with it so that you could actually see the kind of things that she stands for and, be able to get out there. But we know that Sasha Banks her number one aspect is she's attention seeking. And that's, a big thing with heels in general is that, you're attention seeking. But that's her number one thing, because that's her stock and trade, her currency. Is Sasha Banks trades on attention. That's big on women in general. That, part of wanting to be the champion, part of wanting to be the star of the show is you get the most attention, you can make the most money. So why wouldn't she want that? And if she has to break your fingers in order to get it, she has to make a child cry in order to get it, she's going to do it. If she has to protect her spot, she's willing to pull your hair off your head. She's willing to do it, whatever it takes. And I like that, but I see the boss as being more of an aspirational concept that Sasha Banks is, it's a journey that she's going on more than a character that she actually is. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.